In this exercise, you'll be interpreting graphs. The type of graph we have here is called a travel graph. It is also called a distance time graph. The reason it's called a distance time graph is if you look at the horizontal axes, you'll see there is time. If you look at the vertical axes, you'll see there is distance. So it's often called a distance time graph. Looking at the horizontal axis where we have time, we often call the values that we use there, the horizontal values, we call that the domain of the graph. So the domain in this time is those values in time in minutes. The vertical values we call range. So the vertical range here is the distance from home in meters. So what I'm going to do is step you through how to interpret this graph. This graph will be used in the first several questions in the exercise in your textbook. So I'm going to read the first paragraph. Kurt leaves home and walks first to the local shop to buy a magazine and then to his friend's house. His friend is not there, so he jogs home. This graph represents his journey. This type of graph is often called a travel graph. Now I'm going to take you through how to interpret the graph. The first thing we're told is Kurt leaves home. So if he's leaving from home, on the vertical axis, the distance from home will be 0. Because he's at home, there's no distance away from home. It's also the value of time, because it's about when he's about to leave on his trip. So now, it says to us that he walks first to the local shop. So, I have just highlighted the part in the first paragraph, walks first to the local shop, and I've highlighted the first straight line on the graph. That straight line on the graph represents his journey to the shop. So what do we notice there? We notice that he leaves from home and he travels for 2 minutes and he travels 240 meters. So what does that tell us? It tells us the shop is 240 meters from his house and it took him 2 minutes to get there. Now I'm going to change the colour of my highlighter to green. It now says to buy a magazine and then, so the next part, to his friend's house. So this is the journey to his friend's house. To be at his friend's house, he needs to be moving. That's why the line is at an angle. So, you can see I've highlighted the line at an angle in green. That's his journey to go to his friend's house. You might be thinking, why didn't I highlight the horizontal line joining line A and line C, which I am now going to circle in blue. Kurt went to buy a magazine. So when he was at the shop, he was buying the magazine. He was not moving further away from his house, he was in the shop. So what does that tell me? It tells me that from 2 to 4, 2 minutes, Kurt was in the shop. He was not moving any further distance away. Now I'm going to change my pen to black. So what does that now mean? He then went to his friend's house. It took him from 4 to 8, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes to travel to his friend's house. So he was 240 meters away from his house at the shop. From the shop he travelled to his friend's house, which moved him from 240 up to 360. That moved another 120 meters from the shop and further away from his own house. It then says to us, his friend is not there, so he jogs home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the highlighter again, and this time I'm going to go to aqua. So the last part of the graph, that is the part where he is travelling home. And I'm going to highlight the part in the sentence which says, his friend is not there, so he jogs home. What does that tell me? Okay, it tells me, firstly, that he went back from being at his friend's house, which is 360 meters from his house, back to his own house. So his own house, he got there at the number 10. So he's no distance from his house, he's back to his own house. So now I'm going to change the colour of my pen again. This time I'm going to change it to green. So what that is telling me is that it took him 2 minutes to travel back home. So let's go through his journey. He started at home. He moved in 2 minutes to 240 meters away from his home where the shop was. He then spent 2 minutes in the shop. He then left the shop and walked to his friend's house, which was 360 meters away from his house, another 120 meters from the shop, and it took him 4 minutes to do that. His friend wasn't home, so then he returned to his own house jogging. It took him 2 minutes to return home, which was travelling 360 meters. Now we're going to look at the 3 lines that I've highlighted. There's something else that we can work out from that. We can work out Kurt's speed. Speed is equal to the distance travelled divided by time. So if I want to work out his speed to the shop, what I want to do is work out how long it took him. It took him 2 minutes. How far did he travel? 240 meters. So 240 divided by 2 is 120. So the units, meters per minute. if I wanted to work out the speed from the shop to friend's house, then the distance he travelled, he was 240 metres away from home. He travelled to the shop, which was 360 metres from home, which is a further 120 metres. He did that in 4 minutes. So 120 divided by 4 is 30. So he was travelling at 30 metres per minute. Going to the shop, he was travelling faster than he was travelling to his friends. When he returned home because his friend wasn't there, the speed home from his friend's house was he travelled from 360 metres away from home back to home, so he travelled 360 metres. He did that in only 2 minutes. 360 divided by 2 is 180 metres per minute. So that is how you can interpret the graph and work out different speeds that he travelled. Now I'm going to look at question 12 from your textbook. We're given some writing and we're given a graph. Again, I'm going to interpret the graph for you. Nina walks from her home to school. I've highlighted that in yellow. I'm going to highlight where that is on the graph. So she's left from home and she's gone to school. It has taken her 1 hour to get there. And she has travelled 3 kilometres. On the way home. So on the way home, that means she's going to be getting closer to home. On the way home, she stopped for her dental appointment. So, stopping for her dental appointment, I've highlighted in green. So there we've got it highlighted in green on the graph. That's on her way home. We know that because it is getting closer to home. After that, she then returned home. So what else do we have there? We have 2 straight lines. Well, we know she went to school. So the first part is when Nina was at school. Then she was at the dentist. So the second straight line horizontally is when she's at the dentist. So let's go through what we've got. She went to school. It took her 1 hour. She was at school for 5.5 hours. She then went to the dentist. It took her half an hour to get to the dentist, which was 2 kilometres away from her house. She was at the dentist for 1 hour and then she returned home. The half hour it took her to go home, she travelled 2 kilometres. So now let's answer the questions. I'll answer the questions in blue. How far did Nina walk from home to school? From home to school, we've put that in yellow. So she walked 3 kilometres. When did she leave school to walk to the dentist? She left school to walk to the dentist at 6.5 hours. That's 6.5 hours after she left to go to school. How far did she travel to get to the dental clinic? So, travelling to get to the dental clinic, she left school and went to the dental clinic. That was 1 kilometre. How long did she spend at her dental appointment? She was there between 7 and 8. That is 7 and 8 hours. So that's 1 hour. What time did Nina arrive home if she left home at 7:30 a.m.? So if she left home at 7:30 a.m., she got back home after 8.5 hours. So what we have to do is add 8.5 hours to 7:30 a.m. So from 7:30 a.m., the extra half an hour would take us to 8 a.m. Now we want another 8 hours after 8 a.m., which would be 4 p.m. So she would have arrived home at 4 p.m. In which section did Nina walk the fastest? So we look to see where the line is the steepest. The line is the steepest where she has left the dentist and returned home. So, home from dentist. It asks us what was her speed there. So her speed, home from the dentist, she travelled 2 kilometres distance divided by time, which was half an hour. So I'm going to write it as a half. So 2 divided by 1/2 is 4. So her speed was 4 kilometres per hour. It then says to us, interpret the graph by describing Nina's journey. List the domain and range of the graph. So what this means is to describe the journey in words, stating the various times. An example of this in words would be, Nina left home and it took her 1 hour to get to school. That was 3 kilometres away. She was at school for 5.5 hours. After that time, she left to go to the dentist. It took her half an hour to get to the dentist, which was 1 kilometre from the school. She was at the dentist for 1 hour. She then left the dentist and returned home. It took her half an hour to travel the 2 kilometres home.